All right, so today on the podcast, we have Myron Johnson with us. Thank you for being here. And yeah, as per usual, we like to hand over the mic to our guest for you to give us your short life overview.
And I'm assuming you're talking about dance and theater.
Sure, yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I started when I was really little. I started when I was 7, in theater primarily, and then started dance when I was around 8 or 9, and it continued my entire life. I never stopped. I got serious about dance when I was around 17, when I went to Europe to study with Marcel Marceau. And it was such a completely different culture there artistically, and so easy to be a student because everywhere you went there were people learning something to learn. I started taking classes at the Paris Opera, then started training with someone named Peter Goss, who was one of the first jazz choreographers that was really incorporating ballet and jazz instead of just Broadway jazz. And then came back to Minneapolis and started my own company and ran that for almost 30 years. And that's that. Overview.
That's good. So let's dig into your childhood a little bit. When you were growing up, how did that transition happen between you not doing any dance or theater into dance and theater? Was it?
I think before I started learning, before I got into theater, I was just learning how to walk and talk. And then I was literally walking down the street to my grandma's house. And after school, first grade, maybe kindergarten, first grade. And on the sidewalk were these purple dinosaur prints that led up to the door of this building that I had gone to nursery school in. And I could not figure out why they were on the sidewalk. And I followed them in the door, and inside the nursery school was gone. And a woman came up to me and said, "Are you here for the tryouts?" And I didn't know what tryouts were. And I said, "Sure, yeah." Apparently I said yes. I don't quite remember. And she said, "Well, come in here." And there was a little stage. And she said, "Can you be a weeping willow?" And I did something. And she said, "Would you like to be in a play?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Where are you on your way to? Why are you alone?" I said, "I'm on my way to my grandma's house." She said, "Can you get your grandma and bring her back?" I did. And I started in that play, and I never left.
Oh my God.
Wow.
I know.
What theater company was that?
It was called the Moppet Players, and it later became the Children's Theater Company.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't you teach at the Children's Theater Company?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about
I was there. I grew up there, and I taught there, directed plays there. I was there for 25 years.
Wow.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
So that's your into theater. What about the whole dance culture?
In the theater, in that particular theater, movement was quite a big part of what the director was trying to work on. She was trying to incorporate movement, theater, music, but obviously it was a tiny little, I think the stage was 8 feet by 12 feet. It was a tiny little thing. And I had my right foot was sort of turned in a little bit pigeon-toed, and the doctor had said to me that I needed to wear those braces on my shoes, and that was not going to happen. And I got the braces. I never wore them. I'd leave the house and take them off and hide them in the bush. And someone at the theater said you should take modern dance. And I, honest to God, thought that modern dance was like the twist, the fugue. I thought it was modern dance. I didn't know it was modern dance. So I went to Minnesota Dance Theater, and I think I was 8, and started studying with Lois Holton, and I fell in love with it right off the bat. I never stopped going, never stopped dancing from that day on.
Wow.
My right foot is not as turned out as my left foot.
But it still works.
But it still works.
And you didn't need braces?
No, I never wore them.
That's great.
So then you went to Europe when you were 17. How did you make that decision?
I saw Marcel Marceau on the Tonight Show when I was probably 15 or 16. And then I somehow heard that he was going to be at Fargo Moorhead University. And I took a train by myself, somehow got the money to take a train there, and went to the theater where he was performing. And I told the woman at the box office that I needed a ticket, but I didn't have any money. And she said, "I'm sorry, the show is sold out." And I kind of started to walk away. And someone came up to me and said, "I have a ticket," gave me a ticket. And before I went into the theater, the same woman from the box office came up to me and said, "I'm glad you got a ticket, and I just arranged for you to go backstage after the show." So I did. I saw his show, and I went back and sat in the dressing room with him. And he told me about his school, and I told him about me, and he said, "I would love to have you come to the school." I came back to Minneapolis, and 5 months later, I was in Paris at a school on a scholarship that I got from Children's Theater.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was lucky.
So what did your mom think about that, you going to Europe?
You know, she was nothing but supportive about absolutely everything. As I've gotten older, I've asked myself that same question, because it couldn't have been easy for her. I was her only kid, and to send me up to Paris I had just turned 17, she had to have been terrified. But she did. She let me go. And while I was gone, unfortunately, she got sick and didn't want to let me know, because she thought I would come back.
Oh.
And so after about 1.5 years, I got a call from a neighbor telling me, that my mom was sick, and she obviously didn't want to tell me. So I immediately came back, and she passed away like 1.5 weeks later.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, otherwise things may have gone very differently for me. If that hadn't happened, I probably would have stayed there. I don't know what I would have done.
So you didn't go back?
I did go back for a while, yeah. And Marceau was starting a company, and he wanted to have me be in his company. And I really thought about it. It would have been wonderful to be in a company in Paris in the 70s. I mean, it was a pretty amazing place. But I knew that I wanted to do my own thing, and that I was very interested in combining mime, dance, music, theater. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and no one was really doing that. And the only other place I thought about, I think if I would have ever joined a company, it would have been with Béjar, the Ballet of the 20th Century, it was called at that time. I think that's probably the only company, and that I don't think that was a real possibility. He had about 250 men already. Like,
but
oh my gosh.
you are amazing at doing your own thing, and I think that was a really good decision on your part. What made you make your company? How did that happen? And why did you choose that name, the Ballet of the Dolls?
yeah, that's a good question. It, like everything else in my life, it just sort of was the next thing that presented itself.
Yeah.
I am always like that. I don't really, as you guys know, I'm not a very good planner. I just kind of go along, and if someone goes, here, you want to go to New York? I'm like, sure, I'll go to New York, and then I'll go to Paris, and then I'll go to wherever. And one thing always leads to the other. In the case of Ballet of the Dolls, I went to a performance at a little cabaret in Northeast Minneapolis, and it was pretty much a music venue. It was called Ruby's Cabaret, and while I was sitting there watching a musical act, I was like, this would be a cool place for dance, because it's clearly not made for dance. The space was maybe 8 by 8, and then it had cabaret tables all the way around it. I was like, this would be cool to see what dance was like in a place that's not made for it.
Yeah.
And so I talked to the owner, and she was like, oh yeah, absolutely, put something together and come on down. And so I did. And it was supposed to be for 2 nights. I think we went 3.5 weeks, maybe.
Oh my gosh.
It's just, it was the right thing at the right time at the right place. And within that period of time, people were wanting it to form into an actual company. It hadn't occurred to me. And so a lawyer that I knew came up and said, I think you should incorporate, and I think you should be a nonprofit, and I think you should have a board. Before I knew it, within like 6 months, we had a company running called Ballet of the Dolls. And the show that I had done at this place called Ruby's Cabaret was called Beneath the Ballet of the Dolls.
Oh.
And it was a play on both the movie at the time, Valley of the Dolls, and the idea of dolls, which always fascinated me, that dolls were so, there's nothing to a doll until you pick it up and create whatever you want to with it. And I love that about dolls to this day. You lay them down and there's nothing to them. You pick them up and you bring life to them. It was cool. And so people like the name. It stuck with people, and so I kept it.
Yeah.
Nice. So we were in your production of the Nutcracker Not So Sweet, which we had 3 amazing years doing, playing Ken and the nephew and Marie character. How did you come up with that idea? Was that just a continuation of your company's culture of the dolls? How did that manifest?
Yeah, that the idea of dolls coming to life was an early part of Ballet of the Dolls, and then it slowly went away. The shows didn't have much to do with actual dolls coming to life. It just I think dolls like that it sort of changed to oh you beautiful doll, like oh you're a doll. And when I started deconstructing shows, I think Nutcracker was the first one where I took a classical ballet work and took it apart and deconstructed it. It originally did not have Barbie and Ken in it, didn't have dolls in it. It was just a little girl who was clearly in her 30s with a mother that was treating her like she was 11 or 12. And it became sort of it was sort of a parody on the story of the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
And then each year we would do that at Christmas time, and each year it would be a different story. And probably in the third year, it occurred to me, like, why in the hell wouldn't there be a Barbie doll in here? Why would it be a Nutcracker? Who plays with a Nutcracker? I don't even know anyone who uses a Nutcracker, but it made total sense. And then from the minute Barbie got in the picture, then of course Ken came in the picture as the Nutcracker, and then things went from there. And that's one of my favorite adventures of my whole life, is watching that story unfold differently every year for like 25 years or something.
Yeah.
How do you make a new story out of the same story?
You know, I think it gets affected by what's going on in the world from year to year, what's going on in music from year to year, who's in it, who's going to dance the parts, because as you know, I'm not that into recreating choreography that's been done already, that we've done already. I think with you two, it might have been one of the first times because it had been yours originally. So it was a little bit easier to say, you know, there's nothing wrong with this pas de deux. Why do we have to change it?
Yeah.
And then it inevitably changes anyway, because you guys are a year older and I'm a year older and we know more, and who knows. But that's the first time where things have actually stayed the same from year to year. And I hand that over to you guys because I couldn't find anything wrong with it. It was like, it's beautiful just the way it is. Why do I have to mess with that?
That's nice.
That is nice.
That's very nice.
I want to know, so when we would be in the studio with you, you had a way of choreographing like lightning. Like I couldn't believe that you could make the whole ballet in like 2 weeks. That's insanity to me. Like no one does that. And I'm curious, do you come in the room with choreography, or is it just that you have the music ready and you know the music? So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. That I think I would, if I said that I had a gift, I think that's what my gift is that choreography and dancing is my language. So for me, it's as simple as walking in to a room full of people and sitting down and having a conversation. It's that simple for me. It just, it is my language. It is the way I speak. And I am responding a lot to what I'm getting from the dancers in the studio.
Yeah.
I can look down at someone's feet and some dance steps happen. I can see choreography when I look down at their feet. I know I'm getting it from them. Sometimes I know the music, as you guys well know. Sometimes I don't. It depends on what we're working on. If it's Mozart or it's Rachmaninoff or Stravinsky, I may have to spend a little more time before going into the studio with the music, but it really I am so into it all happening in the moment in the studio that I think that's why it goes so fast.
Yeah.
I don't have any expectations. So there's nothing to slow the process down. It just goes. And then I have no problem with at the end of a rehearsal going, well, that sucked. We don't need to do that. We can do another one tomorrow, you know? But that happens so rarely.
Yeah. I don't think
because it has so much to do with the people who, I have so much respect for the artists that have to do the work. I have more respect for the dancer than I do for the choreographer.
Mm.
The choreographer doesn't have to go out and do it.
Right.
The dancer has to make it their own. And it's so hard because if you're the choreographer, that's how your body moves.
Yeah.
So I'm moving the way I hear the music and I'm saying, do it this way. It's really difficult to take that and put it into your own body and make that real for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that job, I just respect it so much. I've done it so rarely. I've been choreographed on so rarely. And when I have, I've absolutely hated it.
Really?
Oh, I just hate it. I've had to go in once or twice for someone injured or something, and I would have to go in and do like my own choreography. And I would realize that it wasn't even, I had worked with the person doing it, and it was actually the way they move, not the way I move. And I would come off stage and just say to people, dancers, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I hate it. I just hate it.
So is that the same? That's obviously not the same when you're on stage doing your show.
No. It's if someone else choreographs on me. First of all, I can't remember anything. If someone shows me choreography, I can't remember. My brain is so used to just remembering my own choreography that it just doesn't, it's not trained. That muscle isn't trained at all. So I can't learn. And I'm just not used to, that's a real art. That's a real art, as you both know, to take someone's choreography and bring it to life and make it your own. That's an art form unto itself. When I'm doing my own choreography, then I can be a performer like you guys. But if one of you were to try to choreograph on me, it would just be miserable.
I almost did, Myron.
When?
For Ballet Works.
That's right.
And you were really open to it. And I kind of wish that one day we could try that.
That's right.
Even if you hate it.
Well, remember how much I hated titty cut ballets? I was just miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you were.
Well, that show was really emotional too.
That was a miserable character.
Oh, just terrible. I hated him.
For those who don't know, Titty Cut Follies is a ballet choreographed by James Sewell, and Myron played for a certain amount of time in the show as
Jim.
His name was Jim. Yeah, and
Yeah.
he would stomp around, and
Yeah.
he was really mad all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a terrible place to have to go.
Yeah. And you went there.
Yeah, I did.
So let's talk about teaching a little bit. You were involved in the theater world with teaching, directing, choreographing, and you were up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, teaching kids.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned from that?
I started, here's the weird thing. I started teaching when I was 19, maybe. And there's no reason anyone should be teaching at 19. And I taught 2 or 3 classes a day for 5 days a week for years at Children's Theater.
Wow. And that's when you came back from Paris.
Yeah. And jazz was kind of a new thing, so it was really popular. And I was kind of into sharing the whole idea of contemporary ballet and modern day pop music kind of coming together. Mm-hmm. That was fun. But I was also teaching ballet, and I don't think I thought I knew what I was doing, but I didn't really know what I was doing. My theory of teaching was just do it. Like, if someone would ask me a question, my answer was always just do it. Just do it. And part of that had to do with the fact that I had grown up just doing it, right, that I didn't know how you do it. I didn't have any information that I could share about how to do it. I just knew how to do it. And that isn't really a teacher, as I learned later in life. Mm-hmm. I got better at teaching, but I was really trying to teach so that the dancers that I was teaching would be better at my work. Yeah. As opposed to a better dancer. Do you know what I mean? It felt a little bit Balanchine like I was trying to train people to be good at what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then when I got older and I started performing less, and when I went up to Grand Rapids, there wasn't anything else to do but teach. And it wasn't about me performing. It wasn't about me choreographing. It was simply about me teaching. And that's all I had to do. And I fell in love with that. I realized what a good teacher I could be. Yeah. If that could just be my focus, and focus on training not just the body, but the mind and the spirit. I'm really good about working with people that are not the perfect body type for dance. They tend to be my favorite people to work with, because they have to go a little deeper and search a little farther than people who have those bodies that just naturally adapt to whatever you ask them to do. And I'm good about removing a part of, I've been in the world of dance through so many changes, from what are real stereotypes of dancers, that they're stupid, that they're completely egotistical and self-involved with how they look, and they're never thin enough. And I come from that world, and where teachers would just say to you, you're never going to be a dancer if you couldn't turn out way past your own physical turnout, or you need to lose 20 pounds. Saying that to like a 15-year-old, that's that world that I grew up in. So I love that I get to share the opposite of that. And not just, you don't, not having conversations about that stuff, but real conversations about what's going to make you look the best. What's going to make you look the best? What is quasi to you?
Yeah.
To your body, not what is quasi to everybody, you know?
Yeah.
What looks best on you? Why? And right away, working with kids in northern Minnesota, saying to them, why do you want to dance? Like, why are you even here? And getting them to start thinking about that, as opposed to, I just want to be here because my friends are here. No, I think you're here for more than that.
Let's go back to what you said at the beginning of this. You were talking about teaching at 19 and saying that nobody should do that. I was fortunate enough that a couple studio owners in South Florida let me teach when I was 16. Obviously, not 3 classes a day. I had like 1 class a week at a couple studios. I was obviously a terrible teacher, but I learned a lot from it. Is there ever a good time when a teenager should teach dance?
Yeah, I think that assistant teaching is so great.
Yeah.
Assistant teaching with someone, and then if, for instance, if you had an assistant teacher who was 16 or something, and something happened that you couldn't teach, they could teach, they could come into it that way. They could, I remember how much I learned from teaching. I learned how to dance from teaching. The only thing looking back on it now is that it really was so much about when you're teaching, you let's say, and now we're going to do a double pirouette. When you're teaching, there's an added kind of pressure that if you're going to be the teacher, you have to be able to do it. And I would just pull out stuff that I don't think I normally would have been able to do it, but it was sort of like being on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're having everyone watch you. And so you're forced to do what you're asking them to do really well. And so it became, the only reason I say that I wasn't a good teacher was because it was so much about me. It was about me showing off, me learning. I'm sure that the exercises I was giving were probably things I was good at.
Yeah.
I doubt very much that I was having people do things that I couldn't do.
Yeah.
But
when did that switch?
That being able to put into words something physical, that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing.
Yeah, I'm curious, when did that switch happen for you when the teaching became less about you and more about the students?
Probably not until I went up north, which is what, 5 years ago or something?
Something like that.
Interesting.
Where I really looked around and there was a room full of kids, and I was like, whoa, I remember what this felt like. To be this age and to be looking to want to be so hungry for information.
Yeah.
And not just about dance, but art and what am I going to do with my life and self-esteem. And it opened my eyes because it wasn't really about me anymore. It wasn't about me performing. It's the first time I really taught without being in full dance clothes. But sometimes I would teach in tennis shoes. Sometimes I would have a pair of pants on. Mm-hmm. And I would do it on purpose so that I wouldn't fall back to showing them how to do something all the time, but learning how to pick out a student at the bar and go, you're going to be the demonstrator right now. And have them do it and then point out, this is what's so great about this. This is what we have to work on. And that shifted everything about how I taught. It wasn't just, here's how you do it and watch me and copy me.
Yeah.
Because that's how I think a lot of us were brought up, was dance was just learning how to copy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's why that mirror thing,
that mirror thing.
You know, there are times where it hits me that I've lived my entire life in a mirror. You know, and when it sort of became a popular thing to cover up the mirrors, I was like, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
I couldn't balance. I couldn't tell if my leg was high, low, turned in, turned out, because it never had to do with how it felt. It had to do with how it looked.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you like the idea of taking away mirrors?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I don't think, I understand the reason for them.
Yeah.
And then now it's nice that we know you can do both.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to learn how to get out of moving that figure in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that's where all the self-esteem stuff comes in, is that watching kids, that became a mission of mine, of tell me what you're seeing in the mirror. Tell me what you're seeing. And then I'll tell you what I see. And let's see how close we are. Because it will blow your mind what people see in the mirror.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your choreography some more. So when you choreograph things, do you think about the audience and the final product?
100%. It's what you guys are naturally so good at, that I recognized right away when I started working with you, that the ability to move, to be on stage and move your body and see yourself from like the back row of the theater at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it is about, for my work, it is about the experience of the artist on stage and the audience, not the audience doesn't exist. Or their role in this event is to just sit and observe. I like the idea that there's that communication back and forth. Are you following? Are you following what I'm trying to tell you? And being in touch with that, with the energy, and go. I got so good at it that I could feel that I had just done something that nobody saw. I could feel it, and then have to, in the moment, figure out how to retell that, because it was important that they know that moving forward.
Yeah.
So that communication and the role of the audience is so important to me, that it is a part of my thinking when I'm choreographing. Sometimes it it means simplifying. I'll get a little fancy sometimes, or a little fancier. What's another word? Tell the same thing more than once. Mm-hmm. And that's where I look to. I'm thinking about you two in particular in working on something with those roles in the Nutcracker. I could feel when you guys would actually let me know that I'd already told that. You've already said that this is about wanting to kiss. We don't have to keep telling that over and over. Or if we do, that has to be the reason. Yeah. We're just going to tell it over and over and over and over because that's what we want to tell. And a big part of my career was in the 80s, especially with Ballet of the Dolls. It was in the 80s when modern dance was everything. There was very little ballet going on, no storytelling, no story ballets at all. And I would hear quite often from funders that Ballet of the Dolls was not art, it was entertainment. Huh. And I really appreciated that because it made me think about it. And everything I would go to, especially at that time with modern dance, a large percentage of it, you had no idea what was going on.
Right.
It was so internal to the performer that yes, it was not entertaining at all. It wasn't the purpose of it, but I also had come from such a theater background that it was uncomfortable to me. Like, how come I don't get to understand what you're doing, enjoy what you're doing, be moved in any way by what you're doing, but be so intellectual and removed from it that it forced me to get more into what I was doing. I can't remember the question. Did that have anything to do with it?
Sure. Talk a little bit about, you're just talking about like in the 80s. What big differences do you see in the dance culture back then and now?
Lots of stuff. At that time, when I came back from Europe, in Paris in particular, if you were an artist, you were at the top of the list. An artist was like one of the most respected things to be. A dancer was a huge, you were a rock star if you were a dancer. And that became, I thought, I started thinking that way. And you never saw dancers come out of Paris Opera, any of the studios, in sweatpants and tennis shoes. People actually dressed. It was a holdover probably from Ballet Russe, where when they would travel, they would wear hats and gloves and dresses. They represented in a different way. Yeah. So when I came back to Minneapolis, that was part of my thing, was all the dolls were going to, whenever we went anywhere that represented Ballet of the Dolls, all the girls looked like they walked right out of the 60s. Hair up, gloves, high heels. All of us guys were in suits and ties and bowlers, and our version of it. But to sort of bring the idea that dancers are glamorous.
Yeah.
And you can imagine in the 80s in Minneapolis in modern dance, that was not the case. Dance had become very sporty. It was athletic and sporty and sweaty and baggy clothes. It was more of a bohemian thing.
Yeah.
And so to juxtapose that with Ballet of the Dolls, with pearls and rhinestones and glamorous leftover, that was not a part of the period at the time. But also the idea that in performing dance, nobody wants to see you sweat. We're just going to stay. This is what we do. This is easy for us. With this, you don't need to know how hard this is. You don't need to know how dirty I actually am. Like underneath this, how sweaty and dirty I am. And that was very anti the scene at the time. The ballet had fallen out of favor. I think it was a much smaller group of people that were sticking with ballet. And then even then, it was because ballet would be a good foundation for whatever you wanted to do.
Right.
That still holds true, I think. I think there's a lot of people that still only do ballet because it's a good foundation for anything. I think that's true. I don't know. I see modern and contemporary dancers now that I don't know if they've taken ballet or not. It's all become so meshed together.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was a real shift. It was a real shift in dance as a sport. And that was just not true for me growing up, and certainly for me in Europe, it was not that. Dance was an art, not a sport.
Do you think, or how did that play, your company wearing clothes like that? Did it go well?
It didn't play well. It played well to us. We had a blast.
Yeah.
And it certainly got us noticed, both pro and con, but we would start to hear things that Ballet of the Dolls was a cult.
Oh.
And because I didn't have auditions for Ballet of the Dolls. If, like the rest of my life, people would just sort of show up.
Yeah.
And I was at one of the dancers that you guys know. I was at a secondhand store one day, and I noticed on the other side of the rack was this girl that kept like poking her head up over the rack of clothes, and then she'd hide when I'd look. And I went over, and finally after a while I was like, do you want to talk to me or something, or what's going on? And she said, my name is Julie, and I'm a dancer, and I've seen Ballet of the Dolls, and it would be my dream to work with Ballet of the Dolls. And I was like, well, come tomorrow. She came the next day and was there for 12 years.
Wow.
And that's always how it happened. We never had like auditions for anything. So it started to be, it was hard for people to understand what it was.
Yeah.
If it doesn't run the way other companies do, if you don't have auditions and you don't participate with, we were, off in like the North Loop area, and they were building Hennepin Center for the Arts. So almost all the dance was going on in one building. And we were on our own, separated from the dance community. And so we were never kind of considered part of it. We were always kind of fringe. More, I don't know what actually people thought of us. We weren't, very few dancers came to see us. We developed an audience that was not a dance audience. We developed a kind of theater audience, which was great because the dance audience, as you know, is small in Minneapolis. You can't sustain on the amount of people that are going to go to dance. So by bringing in a theater audience really helped us.
How did you bring them in?
Huh?
How did you bring those people in?
I think my background was so much in theater, and the work we were doing was more theatrical, storytelling. So it was more interesting to theater audience than just dance.
Yeah.
And it started so organically. We started in my loft downtown, and we couldn't sell tickets because we didn't have a license to do anything. So we would do membership. You could get a membership to be a member of Ballet of the Dolls, and then that you would pay $5 or something when you came to the show. And we did it once a week, and it just gradually built. And as the work in the company built, so did the audience. So it sort of grew together.
Yeah.
We weren't, at that time, people were wanting to start a company, raising the money first, figuring out what their mission statement was. What are we, they're doing all the business part and then starting a company. And we were the absolute opposite. We were trying to keep up business-wise.
You were the Colt around the corner.
Exactly. And it didn't help that everybody was walking around in high heels and pearls and...
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
I love that.
But the point was, and I don't even know how many people realized it at the time, the point was we were just trying to be anti-dance as sport.
You don't have to talk about this, but I really don't know the answer. What was the end of Ballet of the Dolls? How did that happen?
It grew and grew and grew and grew. And that's the problem with following what's presented to you and what's put in front of you, is that can just keep going and it never stops. And before you know it, we were performing 200 some performances a year.
Oh my gosh.
We had renovated the Ritz Theater. We had raised millions of dollars and renovated and built the theater, then trying to run the theater with not just Ballet of the Dolls, but bringing in other companies to perform in there. So now it's managing a theater, trying to keep up with managing my own company of dancers and trying to do what I loved the most, which was make up ballets. That's what I loved the most. And it was happening less and less, more and more time. This is an age-old story. I've heard so many people tell it. The work became less important than the business.
Yeah.
And people were burning out. I tend to not want to ask people to do things that I wouldn't do, which is not necessarily a good trait in a leader. So if people said they were really tired, but I knew something needed to be done, I would just do it.
Mm.
And one night, I'm getting to the actual end, that was continuing to go like that. And one night the stage needed to be painted black, and the stage was 80 by 40 something.
Wow.
And the stage needed to be painted black, and it was probably 11 o'clock at night, and it needed to be ready to be danced on the next night.
Oh my gosh.
And so I decided I was just going to paint it. And I couldn't find the big roller to paint the stage with. I could only find paintbrushes, like 4-inch paintbrush. And I started upstage left in the corner and started painting on my hands and knees black with the brush. I got about halfway across the stage, and I walked up to where my office was, which was up through the seats. And I turned around and looked at the stage, and about halfway through, I had changed paint cans and gone from glossy to matte.
Oh no.
So now I had to go back and start over halfway back, and I did. And just for like 5 hours, did nothing but stare at black paint and a brush. And without going into detail, the next thing I knew, probably 12 hours later, woke up in a hospital. And something snapped, not surprisingly.
Right.
But the idea of just staring at blackness for 6 hours or something, what that will do to someone who is exhausted, was kind of the end of it all.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
How many people were a part of the company at that time?
14.
Okay.
There's much more to that story that sometime I will probably speak to. I tried one time with another artistic director to talk about it. It's an important conversation for people to have.
Yeah.
About how far you can go, and because you're a theater person, you can hide it pretty well. You can really just kind of keep going.
Totally.
And it's not good for anybody. Certainly all the people that were relying on me, for sure, but that was part of the pressure too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But out of that came such good things, like I don't know how much more I really had to say. And really, like, I would do a ballet today in a heartbeat, but I don't know that I would do 6 in a year.
Right.
Constantly, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What's tell us your best dance story that you have.
Or a couple.
One was, this kind of ties into what I was talking about Europe and who dancers were. I was taking class at the Paris Opera, and I was maybe second or third day, and I was at my spot at the bar, and the door opened, and in came a ballerina in a like almost floor length chinchilla coat with two poodles, two little matching white poodles with gold chains holding them. She walked in and she went over to the ballet bar and she chained up her little poodles on the bar, dropped her chinchilla coat and threw it off into the corner. And underneath she had a metallic gold unitard that included it had gloves attached to it, turtleneck, and it came down and went wrapped over her pointe shoes. So she was solid gold metallic. And she was gorgeous. She was older. She was probably 50 maybe. She had the most incredible energy and persona. It turned out that she had been one of the prima ballerinas in the Paris Opera and had been in a terrible fire.
Oh my gosh.
And her skin had gotten burned.
Oh.
And that was her solution, was she went from gold, and then the next day it was silver, and then the next day it was gold. She would alternate. Her solution was to just cover it all up and carry on. That made quite the impression on me. The other one was Marceau, made quite an impression on me. He would come in, he was still performing a lot, and he would teach when we had him once or twice a week for 6 hours straight. His class was 6 hours long. And he had 3 bodyguards that were triplets, Italian triplets, guys. And when he would go to demonstrate something, he would raise his hand and 2 or 3 of them would come over and hold him so that he could demonstrate, because he was so old and weak, that he would have them hold him up. And then I would go see him that night perform, and he would be a miracle. He would do physical things that I couldn't do when I was 17. And during the day, he could barely walk.
Oh my gosh.
And it made such an impression on me too, and made me realize, I've heard, how many times have we heard each other say, my knee is just painful today. You get on stage, you don't feel a thing.
Right.
You know, you go into that world, and watching him do that made me aware of that world early on. Mm-hmm. So I carried that with me my whole life. I was so clear about that magic world on stage, you know.
Yeah.
The other one was seeing Margot Fontaine with Rudolf Nureyev.
Oh wow.
Do Sleeping Beauty, and she was like 52 or something. And she was doing it with the Paris Opera. And just to see those two together was a story in itself. But she was downstage and he was partnering her, and she did a passe and put her leg out in second, and the core behind her was doing the same thing, but the girl's legs were like up in line with their ears, and hers was like barely to her waist. And she put her leg in second, she turned and looked over her shoulder at the other girls, she looked at the audience, and she went,
No
and
way.
carried on. And the audience applauded and cheered, and I was like, that's the real deal.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, that's amazing. Do you have any favorite stories that you would like to share with us about performances that you've made?
Yes. You mean about shows I've made or performances in particular?
Anything that comes to mind.
I have a couple. That one is a performance of the Nutcracker, where I I stood in the wings, and it was one of the first times that I was moved to, not only moved to tears, but I actually recognized that I was good at what I do.
Mm.
And it was the final solo of Marie, and it was you doing it. And I was standing stage left, and the performance that you gave and the choreography and the music all came so together that my world sort of stopped, and I felt proud, maybe for the first time.
Myron, that's so sweet.
And I don't think anyone would be surprised at that, because that was quite the combination of theater, music, and dance in kind of its perfect form to me that I had been trying to find for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the conversation about going back and sitting on the stairs and not doing anything? That was brand new for me. I had never done that. I had always kept people moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I loved that moment.
Yeah.
And another big moment in my life was it shifted everything from the kind of work I was doing. One of my best friends in the whole world died from AIDS, and it was in maybe 89 or 90.
Wow.
And the sadness and the pain was so intense that without even thinking, I decided to do Mozart's Requiem.
Mm.
I didn't think about what I was going to do with it. I don't think I thought about anything. It just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the whole Mozart Requiem in 11 days. And it was probably by far the best thing I've ever done.
Wow.
And one thing it taught me was to get out of the way of myself.
Mm.
And I spent that was a long time ago. I spent the rest of the time after that trying to get out of the way of myself, because that was so natural at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It just happened. But trying to recreate that for the rest of my career, I really tried and got pretty good at it. Not overthinking things, but letting my emotions let my emotions control my choreography, as opposed to my brain thinking.
Yeah, that's hard to do.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I think you're great at it.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. I think, but partly because I'm not that, I'm like street smart.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to dance from just doing it, being around it all my life. I didn't learn to dance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's hard for me to intellectualize about dance too much.
Yeah.
Because I'm so connected to the feeling of it, the feeling of movement, as you guys know, because so are both of you.
Mm-hmm.
We try to be.
Yeah.
Oh man. So obviously not right now during this pandemic situation, but you have found some working with hospice patients, if that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that. What are you doing, or what have you done prior to that?
After I kind of burned out on theater and dance, I didn't know really what I wanted to do. The only thing that came to mind was I wanted to work in a flower shop, in the back room of a flower shop, and do nothing but just like cut leaves off flowers and just do peon work in the back and just go home afterwards. I was like dying for something that had nothing to do with the ego.
Yeah.
And I really couldn't, nothing was popping up for me. And I went on some website that was about, I thought healthcare sounded interesting, because I had spent, from the time that I stopped the dolls until maybe 3 years later, quite a bit of time in the healthcare on the other side of being the patient.
The receiving end.
And it was interesting because being a director and a observer, I watched what the system is like from the inside.
Right.
So I knew what was awesome about it, and I knew what was missing, especially in mental health. So I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And I filled out an application on one of those work websites, like Indeed or something. I don't know what it was called. And it was about what I would do and what I could do in healthcare, specifically working with elderly and Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's had always been interesting to me, even when I was just in theater, and strokes had been very interesting to me. I always thought I would be good working with people who had strokes, because I could help them learn to communicate in ways that wouldn't rely so much on having the right word at the right time, but help them physically be able to communicate. Anyway, I filled out something talking about my background and why I thought it would be great to work with elderly people or people who were not able to take care of themselves. A couple months went by and I got a phone call, and they said, well, I saw your resume. Can you come in? I went to assisted living facility and did an interview. And it turned out to be, I started working there first as activities, working on keeping the residents active.
Yeah.
And giving each day a purpose, so that you're not just waiting to die.
Right.
And I was good at that. Of course, I discovered it was absolutely like being in theater. Especially with memory care. My brain works like that anyway. I am always on an adventure in my brain. So I have no problem. If you think we're on a boat, here we go. Where are we going? Tell me where we're going. Tell me what it looks like. Let's just have fun on our boat trip.
Yeah.
And it became as rewarding as a performance ever did, in a very different way. And I wasn't there for more than a week before I saw how ironic it was that I had been in a world that had been so ego driven. I wasn't that aware of it at the time. I thought I was very kind of humble. But when I found myself working with people, and you'd have a wonderful 15, 30-minute time with someone and they're telling you that they love you, and you turn around to get a glass of water, you come back and they are asking you what your name is. And you have to let it go, that it's not about you.
Yeah.
Are you willing to give someone something knowing that in 5 minutes they're not going to remember who you are? Was such a humbling experience for me.
Yeah.
And valuable. I had really plowed through working with dancers, not allowing them to really take the time to process things differently. I had tried to force everyone to process as fast as I could, which was really fast. I'd never really acknowledged that some people need a little bit more time. Some people learn differently. Some people can only handle so much at a time.
Right.
So I learned a lot, and it isn't that I feel like I wasn't good in the past. It was nice to be able to recognize that I didn't stay with that my whole life, but I actually learned. I'm still learning. You know what I mean? Totally. Of all the times that a dancer would go, we just did, 4 5-minute long ballets in one day. I'm not going to be able to remember this tomorrow. And I would go, well, you're just going to have to. And just plow forward. And it's like, how inconsiderate is that? And how egotistical is that? You know what I mean?
Especially at a time without video.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And, the pressure of that, why? Why not just, if someone says, I think I just maxed out, why can't you go, okay, then that's that for today. Let's just chill for the rest of the day. And as you guys know, I'm like that now.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, you know what? You guys got this. We don't need to keep, just because we're supposed to rehearse until 5 o'clock and it's only 4, we can stop.
Yep.
We're not running a business. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I really like that outlook. You've kind of answered our last question. Do you have another question?
I just want to hear it again.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I like Jordan just said, you've answered a lot already, and it's great. I just want you to reiterate what is the biggest lesson that you've learned in the last 5 years?
I was gonna say slowing down, but that's not actually what that would be. A misrepresentation. Somewhere in the last 5 years, I have learned that I was and still am really good at what I do. I am a creative individual. I have my own point of view, and it's worth something. And because of that, I think I've been able to, this is really going to sound like Hallmark, but I've learned to love myself enough and appreciate myself enough that I can love others more fully and more unconditionally, because I don't really need anything from anyone other than just loving me. Just love me and I'll love you back. And in there, if we can make up some ballets, that'd be great. But it's more important than anything else. Duh. And I guess I want to be for other people younger than myself starting out. I want to be the best of what I had minus the worst. Not continuing with the bad, ego-driven negative crap that artists have to deal with all the time, but to be a positive force, because I had those people in my life too that were always saying to me, you're good, keep doing your thing, just keep doing your thing, don't worry about what other people want you to do, just do your thing. And that I've been very fortunate to have that. We should all be so lucky, you know, because I feel like that's what I was put here for, was to show what the world looks like in a visual dance form from a person that has the brain that I do. This is what the world looks like to me. Believe it or not. And you know, something happened during this last year. One of the original dolls, everybody was young, like 19, 20, 21. And so they were getting married, having babies while we were doing Ballet of the Dolls. And part of Ballet of the Dolls was, doesn't matter if you're pregnant, you can still be in the show, because every show's being made up original at the time. So there was always somebody pregnant, and those kids were being born into the world of Ballet of the Dolls, living in the studio, hanging out in cabarets, and feathers and sequins were, you know, like all around them the whole time. And they've all grown up. They're all in their 20s now. And about a year ago, one of the children called me and said she had just come back from New York and she wanted to live in Minneapolis again, and she wanted to start a company, and she wanted to start a company that was sort of in tribute to Ballet of the Dolls.
Wow.
Because that was the world she grew up in. And would I support that and endorse that? I was like, hell yes. Of course. What would make anybody feel better than seeing that generation want to pick up where you left off and carry it on however they decide it looks to them.
Yeah.
And so that's actually happening. I worked with them. They did their first kind of showing and performance about a month ago before the shutdown happened. And that's really exciting. That's really exciting because for me, that's actually an outlet for me to get together with them and say, oh, this is cool. What if you do this? Or, you know, how it used to be was like this, and share old ideas with new ideas is pretty exciting.
That's really cool.
And they called the company Dolls of the Wild.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for giving your time. And
I'm happy for you guys. Very happy for you guys.
Thanks,
I would love to work with you again.
Oh, we will.
We will.
Definitely will.
For sure. All right.
Love ya.
Yeah. Myron Johnson, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.